Thanks for having us on your show today. I actually got a presentation I'd like to share with you, so let me just jump it up quickly. So part of my presentation I'm sharing with you today covers basically the Fortinet solution, but also what I'll do is in my presentation is lead up into how we're obviously doing AI inside the Fortinet technology today. So if we start with basically the technology itself, Fortinet have in the last 5 to 7 years enabled a thing called Fortinet Security Fabric. What the Security Fabric does, it ties in the different components that Fortinet basically builds and manufactures. And we basically do our own software-defined networking inside our own technology sets. Plus, we actually work with other third-party vendors as well. This brings an element of new discussions, because within the infrastructure itself, we can start doing things like zero trust network access across all elements of the network. We can start driving more network security, acceleration. We can do basically the definition of security within the components as well. We can look inside and actually have more visibility around the security components as well as the elements of those security components as well. We then bring a facet of cloud. So although we build in hardware, we do the same for cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, call it what you want. And all that features and functionality is built there and built in those same infrastructure and applications too. And over and above that is everything today is AI powered from Fortinet too. So that said, just to give you a heads up is what does this do when we actually enable the fabric for you today? Although you might be buying an appliance or a virtual machine or a cloud service or security as a service, it provides many dynamical functions within that network. So within Zero Trust, we do things like network access control, we do identification management, identification of devices, who's the user, what's the user doing, where's the user going, both in IT and OT. So that's important to actually understand. So we actually service both areas of the business. We also look at who the fabric agent is. Where does the fabric agent want to go to? Where are they allowed to go to? Do they have a security profile within their security profile? What are they allowed to do within their security profile? Case in point here is that, for example, if I want to access the HR documentation, I'm allowed to maybe go to the HR archives and the HR information, but I can't go to, for example, finance or maybe the CXO directories on SharePoint, for example. That's typically what the fabric agent actually does for us. So we're basically locking down what the users are allowed to do on the network. If you look at the section in the middle, security-driven networking, we basically tie in not only the firewall today, but we also tie in what we term as secure access, which basically means the switching component, the wireless component, the mobility component, as well as the enterprise component, all gets tied into a security-driven network. As well as if you have basically your data center and branch office functionality, we drive that same functionality too. And then over and above that, it also basically spills over to the dynamic cloud and solution set too. What we do with all this is we basically powered with AI. We basically build AI into each of these elements, and in my presentation, I'll share how we do this. We also basically look at how we manage these things, and the main thing is that we do a single pane of glass to manage each of these components. We look at automation. So, for example, we try and limit the amount of development work that has to be done, and we also do basically software-defined networking within our own elements of networks, and have a huge library of APIs that actually allow customers to do their own single development or multi-vendor development as well. So this is known as the Security Fabric today. The Security Fabric basically touches everything from the FortiGate in the middle to all the other elements, the endpoint, the wireless network, the access control, management, the API connectors, and many other facets too. Why this is important? Because today the attack surface is becoming a lot broader. Within the digital attack surface, we're seeing a lot more attacks happening. Nobody has one single device anymore. Some people have up to 3 to 4 devices. Those 3 to 4 devices are touching things like the cloud, the other types of services in your environment. We might have branch offices. We might have a function where, the broad office space touches multiple applications, touch multiple elements of applications too. So we're going to protect each and every one of those elements when we're talking about that. Integrated means we can touch everything together, we monitor everything together, and we get visibility on everything together. And obviously automated means that we basically see all workflows that are currently happening. We try and increase the speed of agility, try and increase the speed of operation, as well as response to those types of attacks that are happening at the moment in the network. So within the network security elements is obviously we manage the security risk and protect the hyperscale. We do have software-defined WAN built inside our technology today, as well as implementing things like security web gateway functions, so basically blocking threats from a network security point of view. From a dynamic cloud point, we basically take the same function, bring it into the cloud, and actually use exactly the same elements as well as the same computing function, and use that to build the same cloud functionality as well. And then within automation and private cloud, if you do purchase a Fortinet product today as a hardware and you want to bring it to cloud, we have the same look and feel that is actually built into either the public cloud, the private cloud, or the hybrid cloud today. Web application is a big thing that customers are now looking at, because obviously we've now moved our business to e-commerce. So that basically now means that we've got to start protecting these web application firewalls and services and servers and applications that are lying there, no matter if they're in your own data center or inside the cloud. We've got to protect them, basically protecting things from poison cookies, SQL injections, things like that. Email is a huge problem still. I mean, 78 to 90% of all types of attacks, spam attacks, botware, wormware type of attacks are still happening via email security scams. So email security is still a big thing that customers have to consider when actually designing and looking at dynamic cloud services too. And then security as a service. So, you know, when we start working with things like Office 365, Salesforce, other applications, Oracle Cloud perhaps, we've got to look at how we actually protect that cloud element and that cloud application client inside the cloud. And we use a product called CASB to do exactly that protection function, and actually look at automation. We look at basically usability, user information, functionality as well, what the user is actually doing inside that environment. Zero trust has become a big thing now. With that, we have two things when we talk about zero trust, is that most customers today, when we talk to them, is zero trust is a known environment. When we have an unknown environment, we obviously have to identify the unknowns. We've got to look at who the unknowns are inside the network. We've got to obviously look at them, challenge them, and obviously then decide if we keep them on net or off net, and make sure they are trusted users and track the users and the devices in the network as well. Because, and like I said earlier, this counts not only for IT, also counts for OT now as well, because our part of our technology is we also have OT orchestration function built into our zero trust element network access control. Most important is the centralized management, because with single console, we obviously have to ensure that the single pane of glass can look at all aspects of the network, each element of the network. Within the elements, we can actually do things like audit, basically one-click audits. We can basically do inside the one-click audit, we can actually find out if the elements are out of spec, in spec, they're running the right version of operating system, they're running the right version of patches. We can also then pull a report from that and actually share it with a risk audit manager, for example. Unified application management is very important, because remember that when I log into a network via a VPN or SSL type connection, I am directed to where I need to go. You don't want users basically floating around your network and actually creating misref inside your network as well. And then automation orchestration has been basically a key component and a design criteria from the top of the Fortinet team when we actually do basically the security fabric today. We have a huge component with regards to open fabric ecosystems. We work with many fabric partners today. These are the likes of HP, Cisco, Carbon Black, many others that we actually build fabric connectors with them. What is this? It's basically an open API, which actually helps us to basically interact with these elements of these customers and other third-party providers, because we as Fortinet know we're not everything to everyone. And at the same time, we also want to ensure that when you actually purchase this Fortinet technology, but you can also talk to other third-party elements and actually have one solution information with visibility as well. Obviously, this helps with regards to the DevOps teams developing these types of scripting and automation, and helps you to extend the fabric ecosystem with other vendors and third-party providers too. So moving on to the point now where AI is important, because I think this is the key topic that we're talking about today. So AI is an important element that Fortinet has taken on in the last 4 to 5 years. The reason being is that we need to ensure that no matter if it's an endpoint or a security firewall, it has to predict and prevent the attack before it actually happens. Now, we've seen a huge increase in malware type of attacks happening in the last, umpteen years, but these types of malware attacks are becoming more and more malicious, they're becoming more and more vigilant, and actually becoming more and more dangerous, not only to a single user, but sometimes to a large corporation as well. And the important part here is we need to detect and diffuse these types of threats as fast as possible, real time. With this, we need to obviously learn how these types of attacks happening. And with that, we basically can also respond, investigate, and hunt these types of attacks. So the next time it actually happens, we have forensic information that has already been preempted to actually determine this attack doesn't take place again. We talk about the malicious code detection. This is Fortinet's, within the threat of Fortinet, we have this thing called Advanced Threat Protection Engine. It's built on multiple facets. It's built of an AV engine. So it's an antivirus engine, which is obviously VB100 certified plus more. We have sandboxing technology, which basically allows us to see the unknowns versus the knowns. Testing an application, testing a user, testing a type of connection, testing if it's within inside a data center, testing certain things as well, no matter if it's Windows OS or if it's Apple OS, who cares? And that basically allows us to say, if that is correct and that's right, then the FortiAI starts learning and obviously starts finding out the rotten apple. And then over and above that, we also have the Forti Deceptor now, which basically is a honeypot solution, which is now working hand in hand with the FortiAI as well as the sandbox and AV engines to set traps for these types of users trying to set malicious attacks inside people's networks. So how does this work? Is the AI machine is obviously a constant learning machine. It reduces time to detect in minutes, sub-seconds basically. It's all hardware accelerated. We don't use anything in the cloud. It's built mainly on our FortiGuard services. So what is FortiGuard? FortiGuard is Fortinet's IP technology that has been built from day one. And basically we have about 460 data scientists that sit all around the world. What they do is they obviously scan internet on a daily basis, looking for these types of things like strategic signature types of attacks, machine written signatures, deep neutral network learning as well as self-learning on-premise as well. So this is a function that is part of that function, and the FortiGuard Labs is part of that function as well. And over and above that is the advantage here is we try and focus on human intensive functions as well, because although the human still is the biggest problem in everyone's network, oh, your password's too weak, or you forgot to open close your machine when you walked away from it, or you left your machine open, or you're in a Wi-Fi environment where you got hacked or put a worm on your machine, your AV wasn't working, or your antivirus wasn't working. That kind of stuff still happens today on an immense basis. So we still got to look at the human factor as well as the virtual security analysis factor too, and that's all part of the FortiAI development. So what this brings to us is basically brings that the FortiAI today is live and well. It works in many, many different products. It works in the FortiGate, which is our firewall technology. It basically works in the Forti endpoint. We've also acquired a company quite recently, which now basically provides FortiEDR. So the FortiEDR basically allows not only threat detect and diffuse the endpoint as well. So we can also determine if an attack is happening on the endpoint, where the attack is coming from. And we are so connected today, as you know, like for example, if you're running a Mac or you're running an Android type device, all those devices are interconnected with each other. So if you have an attack on one, typically the attack it filters down to the other device as well. So you basically want to stop that attack as soon as possible. We also have things like sniff input modes, if it's HTTP or HTTPS. We have file submissions where we can take information, put into a sandbox. And also we have integrated modules with the FortiGates where we can actually do things like segmentation, virtualization, and actually look at all types of files inside this Forti API application as well. We have isolators that are built in. And what does isolators do? Like the Forti Deceptor, it actually creates the isolation of the network, but also to trap the user or trap the type of attack that's taking place too. Okay, so FortiAI, what does it do today? It basically analyzes many things. It looks at things like downloads, your viruses, your applications, the coin mining. Everyone runs Bitcoin today, I'm sure. The Trojan horse, the web shell, and it basically does all these types of attacks in many, many scenarios. It identifies at least 20 plus scenarios on a daily basis, but also constantly scanning and tags these in a log file. What this does, it basically means that if patient 0 comes into the network, we basically monitor him, we put him onto a scan. Patient 0 then basically looks at the attack scenario. Within that attack scenario, the malware basically might spread through the network. And here's an interesting fact. Some malwares have basically been placed in people's networks today for over 200 days without them determining that's actually there until they've done a scan. So this is something that's very important, that AI starts coming along and actually starts treating these things like patient 0 types of attacks. Okay, and basically, if the attack does start happening, is you want basically subsequent verdict of how you can stop the attack and how basically the attack and the infection goes away as fast as possible, because you don't want the whole environment to basically be locked down or a worm to be spread through that environment. Okay, and that's me.